Cerebral palsy was first noted in the 1860s when an English surgeon by the name of William Little described characteristics of the disability. It wasn't until the father of modern medicine, Sir William Osler, did the term cerebral palsy come to light when he published The Cerebral Palsies of Children in the 1890s. Since then, ideas about the disability have evolved over time with the development of new technologies. New studies have formed to help try to better describe the characteristics of cerebral palsy. In order to understand cerebral palsy, it's best to start with the breakdown of the actual term. Cerebral refers to the brain, and palsy refers to muscle weakness or impairment of movements. Therefore, an individual with cerebral palsy has trouble controlling the muscles of their body. The disability affects a part of the brain and causes a disconnection of instructional messages over the individual's movement. Cerebral palsy can be attributed to brain injuries or abnormalities that occur before, during, or soon after birth when an infant's brain is still developing. The level of the disability is highly dependent on the severity of the brain injury and where that injury is located. Since there is no cure for cerebral palsy, researchers have turned additional focuses on finding treatments and therapies to better improve the overall quality of life of someone with this disability. Come take a look at just what cerebral palsy entails as I explore the overall concept within this PowerPoint. In order for children with cerebral palsy to begin their education, being evaluated is an essential step to the start of their school career. Before a child can receive special educational services, an evaluation of the child is conducted to see if they are eligible for such amenities. To understand eligibility requirements, disabilities are defined on a federal and state level. Under the federal law known as Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, named IDEA for short, it is stated that schools are required to serve the educational needs of eligible students with disabilities. IDEA has 13 categories in which a variety of disabilities fall into with its own specific criteria. When that criteria is met through evaluations, a student is there deemed eligible for special services. Even though there is no specific federal definition for cerebral palsy, the disability belongs to one of the 13 IDEA categories known as orthopedic impairments. To qualify for special educational amenities under orthopedic impairments, IDEA states that a student must have a severe orthopedic impairment, such as cerebral palsy, and the impairment must adversely affect educational performance. The New Jersey Special Education Code similarly defines cerebral palsy just as IDEA does. New Jersey defines a student with a disability as a student who has been determined to be eligible for special education and related services. Under the New Jersey Special Education Code, cerebral palsy falls under orthopedically impaired, which corresponds to orthopedically handicapped. Our state adds that the term orthopedically handicapped shall include the malformation, malfunction, or loss of bones, muscles, or tissue as well. It is also a requirement in New Jersey that there be a medical assessment documenting the orthopedic condition of that student with the disability. An individual with cerebral palsy will display distinct developmental characteristics. I will explore in detail the physical, cognitive, social, and emotional characteristics of someone with cerebral palsy, as well as explain the different levels of functioning of the disability. While the impairment with cerebral palsy is underlying and hidden within the brain, there are apparent physical characteristics an individual shows when they have this particular disability. Cerebral palsy will begin to show signs through developmental delays during infancy. An infant will have difficulties meeting typical baby milestones such as rolling over, sitting, crawling, and walking. They will also show difficulties with their reflexes. There have been several other observed physical characteristics of someone with cerebral palsy due to their lack of motor muscle control. Muscle tone is responsible for the strength within stretching and contracting muscles, and an individual with cerebral palsy may exhibit floppy limbs, spasmodic movement, or abnormal neck position. Movement, coordination, and control is typically considered the ability to freely regulate one's fine and gross motor skills. An individual with cerebral palsy may exhibit poor balance, a hunch, or dragging of limbs. Common reflexes begin at birth and progress with age. Reflexes are usually a response to stimuli, but disappear after the reaction occurs. As previously stated, infants with cerebral palsy will show difficulties in developing and releasing their reflexes, which will cause complications further down the line. A normal posture can be described as being in an upright position where the body limbs fall into a symmetrical position. An individual with cerebral palsy may not look as straight and can be displaying characteristics such as stiff limbs facing out, knees pressed together, or head tilting to the side. The last physical characteristic is balance. An individual with cerebral palsy may exhibit some exaggerated body movement to compensate for lack of balance due to weakened muscles. Physical appearances represented by this can include swaying or unsteady steps, and to help accommodate their mobility, the individual may need assistance from braces, crutches, a walker, or a wheelchair. Cognition is a person's ability to understand new concepts and integrate it into their library of knowledge to better help them process the world they live in. In order to grasp these new concepts, a person uses a developed thought process compared to previous experiences and include a variety of senses. Persons with cerebral palsy often will be able to experience regular cognitive processes, while others may experience some level of impairment. It depends on the severity of the cerebral palsy and other external factors, such as other health disorders paired with the disability. Individuals with cerebral palsy may experience difficulties with expressing themselves due to a variety of reasons. The normal notion is that in order to be social, one must be able to communicate, which is generally done through language. An individual with cerebral palsy may not always be able to communicate through spoken language due to impairments of the oral motor functions. Luckily, there are other ways for someone with cerebral palsy to communicate. For example, Dynavox is a tablet-sized touchscreen device that allows for users to access personalized speech options. Picture boards also add another dimension of communication to help pinpoint wants or needs. With the assistance of these devices and additional therapies, an individual with cerebral palsy is able to find a way to communicate in the world in a manner that accommodates the severity of their disability. According to Erik Erikson, in order for a child to develop a healthy personality, they need to successfully complete each stage of his psychosocial stages of development. If a child were to leave a stage and enter another without full completion, it would impact their personality in a negative manner. Children of cerebral palsy are presented with significant challenges under Erikson's theory due to the complexity of their disability. During the ages between 1 and 3, according to Erikson, a child is in the autonomy versus shame and doubt stage. During this period, children are experiencing a sense of independence. Children with cerebral palsy may want to do things on their own, but feel limited due to the lack of their motor abilities. Therefore, they learn to grow dependent on others. As they grow older and reach Erikson's industry versus inferiority stage during ages 6 through 12, they may become more aware of how their disability sets them apart as other preteens are accomplishing a variety of tasks. During this stage, the child should have a strong support group to help mentor them in strategies fit towards their disability to help them succeed. It is important a child with cerebral palsy builds their own confidence to overcome their disability so their true personality can surpass the stereotype of their impairment. When an individual with cerebral palsy lacks a proper support system, they may not learn appropriate ways for them to express themselves. This can lead to emotional health concerns such as depression and feelings of isolation. The term cerebral palsy can be quite vague since it umbrellas a variety of classification systems. Cerebral palsy can be grouped in assortments based in particular characteristics. First, cerebral palsy can be generally classified based on severity level. Mild is someone who can function independently. Moderate is someone who can accomplish tasks with the assistance of braces, medications, and use of technology. And severe is someone who uses a wheelchair and requires assistance since they most likely need help to accomplish daily tasks. A classification system that looks more closely at the type of actions that occur within someone with cerebral palsy is movement type. Spastic movements are seen as uncontrolled tightening or pulling of muscles. Athetoid movements are displayed as purposeless, uncontrolled, and involuntary. And ataxia movements are types of actions that are disrupted by impaired balance and depth perception. Lastly, a more in-depth look and classification system of cerebral palsy is based on topographical distribution. In other words, it is a concept devised to describe areas of the body that are affected by the impairment. Under this classification, plegia or plegic means paralyzed, while paresis means weakened. The biggest challenge individuals with cerebral palsy face on a regular basis is being told that they cannot do something simply because of society's misconception of the disability. Regardless of the specific disability, whenever someone learns that a person they are interacting with, if it's not obviously apparent, has a disability, they freeze and their whole mentality about the situation transforms. No longer is the person they are interacting with just a person. They now become seen as a person with a disability. More often than not, despite putting the person before their disability, as that is the proper wording, many people cannot differentiate between the two. Too many within our society, the person and their disability are one and the same, and they could not be more wrong.
I have severe cerebral palsy, which affects my fine motor skills and my speech. I express my opinions across using a light writer and move about in an electric wheelchair or a walker.
So it affects all the muscles in my body, but most severely the left side and my walking. I have no balance, which creates lots of challenges going up and down stairs. I couldn't go downstairs till I was in high school.
Mainly, I trip over my own foot every day.
When my mother saw she was very tough and frightened as I would like to. The main issue is my shakiness in my hands. I can't use computers. I want to clean my teeth. I have a bit of speech problem. Sometimes I have enlarged purpose with my hand around sometimes.
My mind says, do this, and my body goes, no way.
I often wake up with spasms in my right leg, and I have a tendency when I have to get out of bed, lay on a cold floor, or sometimes I have to get my parents out to sort of stretch my leg. When I have spasms from night sleep, because my legs and arms are constantly moving, I wake up exhausted even though I have to sleep. Also, I am quite tired, and I guess that's just because I use so much energy doing stuff that other kids do quite easily. I have to plan things. I can't be spontaneous. Like I can't just ring up somebody and go, oh hey, do you want to go out tonight? To make sure that where we're going is accessible and we can actually get in the door. Catching public transport to work is going to take a bit longer as well because having that physical component of knowing that you're not going to be able to walk as fast as other people. Yes, I can walk and I can make it to the bus stop on time. It just means I need to be careful about how I'm walking to make sure that I don't put myself in a situation where I feel unbalanced.
I always sit with my disabled hand against the wall because sometimes when I get flies in the kind of like spasms and people listening to me and do the position I'm on, you just like frozen.
I see so many people just getting their cars and out the drive. Me, I have to spend thousands on getting modifications before I can even get into the driver's side of the car. Everything is a challenge, but luckily I love challenges. I have some remarkable role models to look up to. I have the attitude, if they can do something, so can I. I think because I've had cerebral palsy, I've actually pushed myself to do more with my life than I might have otherwise done. I've been all over the world. I've represented my country in sport. I've run my own business. I've done all these incredible things that if I was just some average rugby playing kid, I probably wouldn't have done. It's been a struggle having a disability, but trying to get
Depending on the severity of the student's cerebral palsy, they may be able to walk on their own, have mobility assisted by crutches, or be restricted to a wheelchair. In any event, the classroom should be safely set up and arranged in a way for the student to move around freely without hazards. This includes proper placement of desks and shelving. A student with cerebral palsy should be able to access classroom materials and function as independently as possible. If the classroom allows it, a whiteboard and desk should be made height adjustable to assist the student. The best part about an inclusive classroom is the diversity that is brought together within the four walls. A teacher should make it known that every student's voice will be heard and that they all hold equal weight. Group projects and assignments that are geared towards tackling on a challenge will help promote the differences within each child as they learn to work together. Each student can then present their own views and discuss the topic at hand, which can now be seen in multiple ways. It takes the concept of thinking outside the box to a whole new level. Working in groups will also promote a whole new support system that can help each student feel included, especially the child who has cerebral palsy. In a classroom, if a student with cerebral palsy is focusing on their balance and mobility movement when moving around the classroom and school, it's best not to pressure them with the weight of a backpack. Textbooks these days are becoming larger and heavier and could cause further damage if a student with cerebral palsy tried to carry these in a bag on their back. To help the student focus better on lessons, rather than have them worry about taking things home, allow the student to have a second set of textbooks they can keep home so they do not need to lug books to and from school and home daily.